The Northeast has always been hallowed ground for basketball, the mecca, if you will, of the sport we love. New York City has gone a long time since they brought a chip home to the Big Apple, but none in the city will soon forget the names of Willis Reed and Walt Frazier. Juxtaposed to NYC is Baltimore and Washington, D.C., two cities just as historically impactful as a giant metropolis to their north. Prideful, hardworking, and just as rabid about their team as the crazy New Yorkers. Join us as we take a stroll down good old memory lane once again as we reminisce about the days of Wes Unseld and the Bullets and their epic playoff showdowns against the New York Knicks. This is a story of iron sharpening iron, two great teams making each other better over the course of years. This is the second episode in our series on the greatest NBA rivalries. Being that this is part 2 in the series, I would assume you watched Wilt Bill and are at least coming into this knowing just how dominant the Celtics were during the late 50s through the 60s. It was only at the point that Bill Russell retired that any other teams had a real chance at winning the championship. With both the Baltimore Bullets and New York Knicks playing in the East, there wasn't much of a chance for them to compete against the Celtics for much of the 50s and 60s. But each team's fortune would change by the late 1960s. Not just by the retirement of Bill Russell at the end of the '69 season, but by franchise-altering young players that would be the catalyst for this underrated Northeast rivalry. To be a great coach in the Big Apple, it only made sense to be from the Big Apple, and New York had a Red of their own. Red Holzman made a name for himself in the city long before he took over as coach, from fellow NYC area legend Dick McGuire. Growing up in the Lower East Side Manhattan, Red Holzman played high school basketball and college hoops at CCNY. Although he had no ties to the CCNY point-shaving scandal that we covered here, there was some shadow cast on him as a player when he played for the Rochester Royals, where he won the only championship the now Sacramento Kings lay claim to. Although they won an NBA title in '46, this is before the NBA merged, so it's not counted in NBA lore. Holzman was noted for being a great leader and a tactical genius as a player, so in his final season in '53-54, he served as both player and coach for the Milwaukee Hawks, before being fired in '57 for the team's poor performance. He became a scout for the Knicks for the next 10 years, coaching a minor league basketball team in Puerto Rico during his time as well. It wasn't until the '67 season that Knicks management decided to make Holzman a coaching assistant for head coach McGuire, before he then took over as head coach halfway through the '68 season. Dick McGuire was named a scout and assistant coach himself and served the Knicks for the rest of his life. What a cool and graceful way to step aside for the betterment of the team, huh? Very classy from both sides. I am taking the time to build the background of Holzman for two main reasons. I want to showcase the importance of this man's impact on New York City basketball, and as well as to show how a person's determination to not only improve, but to not allow failure to stop them from their goals. Here was a man who had to wait over 10 years for his coaching opportunity, but he remained patient and continued to improve his craft. During the '68 season when Holzman took over for the Knicks, Walt Frazier was a rookie, splitting time with Howard Komives for the point guard spot. The Knicks played a two shooting guard lineup a lot, but after the expansion Phoenix Suns claimed Dick Van Arsdale from the Knicks in the expansion draft that we briefly covered here, Frazier became the full-time starter as point guard for the '69 season. In addition to losing Van Arsdale, who became a three-time All-Star for the Suns, the Knicks also traded away center Walt Bellamy to Detroit Pistons in exchange for Dave DeBusschere. Bellamy himself was an expansion draft pick for the Chicago Packers in 1961, who changed their name a couple of times before becoming the Bullets and moving to Baltimore. Bellamy never became the all-star player for the Knicks that he was for the Bullets, but with DeBusschere, the Knicks got a solid player that they could rely on for the future. How would losing two starters affect a team that management expected to compete with the Celtics and Lakers for championships? When the Bullets drafted Wes Unseld out of Louisville with the second overall pick in the '68 draft, did they expect him to have such an impact that a mostly unchanged roster could improve by 19 games? I mean, realistically, who could have seen it coming? From worst to first? The 6'7", 245-pound center anchored the Bullets in a way few expected. And although he didn't blow anyone away with his scoring, with less than 14 points a game his rookie year, his blow-away strength coupled with his excellent positioning led him to be a great rebounder, particularly on the offensive side. Unseld's ability to anticipate where a ball was going to bounce was second to none, and although offensive rebounds weren't recorded in his day, he was regarded as one of the very best in the league. Unseld consistently put back missed shots or spread the ball around to his skilled scoring teammates. Fellow NBA 75th anniversary teammate Earl Monroe had his best scoring season with 26 a game. Kevin Lowry also had a career best 23 points a game, as well as being a great compliment to fellow big man Gus Johnson, who would have a few all-star selections himself, with Unseld demanding so much attention on the glass. Wes Unseld's impact was felt throughout the league to say the least, and it wasn't taken lightly when Unseld not only won Rookie of the Year, but joined Wilt Chamberlain as just the second rookie ever to win NBA MVP, a feat no one else to date has matched. Despite Jerry Lucas, Nate Thurman, and Chamberlain himself all averaging more points, rebounds, and assists per game than Unseld, it was all of the things that didn't show up on his stat sheet that made the difference. Despite the 19-game improvement and the best record in the NBA, it was time to put up or shut up in the playoffs, and the Bullets faced off against the Knicks for the first of several encounters over the next decade. The mid-season trade that brought the Knicks Dave DeBusschere ended up being the missing ingredient the Knicks needed to finish the team Red Holzman had been building into a championship contender. The Knicks finished the year 36-11 in games that DeBusschere played and finished with a 54-28 record overall. The Knicks faced off against the Baltimore Bullets and reigning Rookie of the Year and MVP Wes Unseld. As good as the duo of Earl Monroe and Unseld were during the regular season, they were no match for the tough Holzman-coached defense, as well as the offensive explosion by the Knicks' new talented core. Reed, DeBusschere, and Frazier all averaged more than 20 points a game, with Dick Barnett and Bill Bradley chipping in with 19.5 and 18 respectively. The Knicks were essentially a newly minted team of all-star level players with an all-time great coach behind them. The Bullets were quickly dispatched in a 4-game sweep. Next up was the Boston Celtics, coached by Bill Russell and captained by Bill Russell. This series, in my opinion, was a strong indicator of just how underrated Russell was as a coach. Matched up against what many experts would consider a top 5 all-time coach, Russell not only had the best performance of any player in the series, but made great adjustments to the Celtics' rotation and made excellent use of his bench, especially in the extremely close 1-point wins at Boston in games 4 and 6, games that easily could have shifted the ties in New York's favor. Instead, Boston played tough defense and pressured the Knicks stars and went on to win their 11th and final NBA championship with Bill Russell by defeating the equally star-laden LA Lakers with Wilt, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor. With a strong big three of Clyde Frazier, Willis Reed, and Dave DeBusschere, the extremely talented bench affectionately known as the Minutemen, led by Mike Reardon and Cassie Russell, and the always fired up and engaged coach Red Holzman, the Knicks knew their window of opportunity was wide open, especially with the sudden retirement of Bill Russell after the '69 season concluded. The team reinforced their belief and commitment into unselfish, team-focused basketball. The Knicks' blueprint was made. They heavily focused on playing tough defense and making flawless passes, and the results spoke for themselves. They allowed the fewest points in the league in 70 with 106 a game. LA was a distant second with 112 allowed, as well as all 5 starters averaging at least 14.5 points a game. Willis Reed won NBA MVP for the 70 season after leading the 60-22 Knicks in points and rebounds. Clyde Frazier wasn't too shabby himself, and Dave DeBusschere averaged a double-double. With the Knicks now hosting the Bullets as the number 1 seed and the best team in basketball, it was the Bullets' turn to return the favor and spoil the Knicks' championship aspirations. The Knicks won the first 2 games, both close, but the Bullets quickly tied up the series. Both teams split the next 2 games, but the Knicks rolled big in New York in Game 7, with the Minutemen bench of the Knicks really showing up and outperforming the Bullets bench. After the hard-fought, tough 7-game series against the Bullets with their undersized big men combo of Gus Johnson and Unseld, as well as Earl the Pearl Monroe, the Knicks had little trouble in the Eastern Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks, captained by Lou Alcindor Jr. better known to you and I as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Despite Kareem's dominating stat line of 34 points, 18 boards, and 5 assists on 55% shooting, tough Knicks defense forced the other Bucks players to hit tough shots, with both All-Star Bucks players Finn Robinson and John McLaughlin, who were both enjoying their best career scoring seasons, completely shut down, with both of them shooting below 38% from the field in the 5-game series. The 1970 NBA Finals was just the second NBA Finals since 1956 that the Boston Celtics were not participating. The shadow of Bill Russell had finally been lifted from the NBA, and thus began the 1970s, an interesting decade that saw a lot of surprising teams win a ring. This finals matchup was anything but surprising, however. The New York Knicks and LA Lakers, the two huge, iconic juggernaut cities of America, were loaded with rosters with superstar players. To say a lot had changed since the last time the Knicks had appeared in the finals was a massive understatement. In the 1953 NBA Finals, the Knicks had lost to the Minneapolis Lakers led by George Mikan in just the 4th season of the new NBA. There were only 10 teams, and there were absolutely no black players. The talent level had completely changed, and the Knicks-Lakers were televised, and pro basketball was becoming very popular, as opposed to the early days of the NBA. With the Knicks having great star players like Clyde Frazier, Dave DeBusschere, Willis Reed, and amazing bench players who would later become good players on future teams, and the Lakers having superstar players like Baylor, Jerry West, and Wilt Chamberlain, this was essentially the start of the super team era. But the blueprint was already made by Red Auerbach and the Boston Celtics. No, they didn't need to sign a free agent to do it, but through trades and other means, you best believe teams were putting together 3 to 4 all-star lineups to make a run at championships. Don't let basketball fans fool you into believing LeBron started that. I'd recommend finding some clips here on YouTube to watch this series between these two teams. It's amazing to watch the superstars of the days compete with each other, laser focused on winning. Both teams played incredibly well, and it went all the way to 7 games, with 5 of them coming down to the wire. The Knicks continued to play their brand of unselfish basketball with a focus on excellent team defense. The results were a pretty spread out scoring, with all starters scoring in double digits, but the famous Knicks bench also outperformed the Lakers bench, as had been the usual in the playoffs. I would be remiss to not mention the famous Game 7 Willis Reed game. After suffering a leg injury in Game 5 that forced him to miss Game 6, in which Wilt dominated the Knicks to force Game 7, Reed decided to play through the injury and inspired his fellow Knicks to victory. A big hit for the Lakers was Wilt Chamberlain's continued struggles at the free throw line, an issue that had plagued the legendary big man his entire career. Chamberlain quite possibly had his worst clutch time playoff performance in the series, with missing 44 of 67 free throws for an absolutely atrocious 34% make rate. As Mark Jackson might say, that is not winning basketball, and the Lakers fell in the finals yet again. This would be Elgin Baylor's last playoff appearance, and he would struggle through injuries the next 2 years before finally hanging it up, tragically never winning a ring in 8 finals trips. Although it was only Holzman's 3rd season as Knicks coach, it was 17 years since he got his first head coaching opportunity with the Milwaukee Hawks. He spent 10 years as a scout and assistant coach before finally getting his chance with his hometown Knicks. Life is certainly about the journey, and Holzman had cemented his legacy in New York City sports lore forever by leading the Knicks to an NBA championship, especially in the dramatic fashion and against a team as good as the Los Angeles Lakers. Now it was time to do it again, and it certainly wouldn't be easy, but Holzman didn't expect nor want it to be. A man I have yet to mention is Coach Gene Shue. Shue was coach of the Bullets during this time and was immensely important to the development of the core the Bullets had during the late 60s and early 70s. Earl Monroe and Wes Unseld were all-time great players to be sure, but it was guys like Jack Marin and Kevin Lowry that played at a near all-star level with Shue as coach, and the Bullets were known for being tough and extremely disciplined and coordinated. Players were utilized based on strengths and their weaknesses were minimized. The Red Auerbach school of thought to be sure. After pushing the Knicks to the limit in the 70 playoffs, the Bullets felt they could finally turn the corner in the 71 season. Well, they certainly didn't play like they expected to turn the corner in 71. The Bullets were extremely inconsistent on both ends of the floor during the regular season, and despite having a 31-20 record at one point, The Bullets won a lousy stretch at the end of the season and finished 42-40, enough to win the awful Central Division by 6 games. Similar to the Miami Heat of this past season, the Bullets weren't given much of a shot in the playoffs, and how could anyone expect them to? The Bullets matched up against the Philadelphia Sixers in the first round of the playoffs. The teams were fairly familiar with each other. They played each other the last 2 games of the regular season, and Game 1 was just 3 days after the final game. This series was hard fought, and it went the full 7-game distance. Despite an incredible performance by Billy Cunningham with 26 points, 15 rebounds, and 5.7 assists, which I feel compelled to remind anyone out there who doesn't know, Cunningham was a 6'6" white guy who averaged over 10 boards a night in the era of Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Nate Thurman, Wes Unseld, Jerry Lucas, Walt Bellamy, etc., etc. The Sixers fell to the amazing and all-around team performance of the Bullets, who had 6 players average double digits in scoring, led by Monroe, Merritt, and Lowry, who all scored over 20 a game. Next up was none other than the defending champions, the New York Knicks. The Knicks won an Eastern Conference best 52 games and had clobbered the Bullets in their last 4 meetings in the regular season. The Knicks core was completely healthy and played together all season long. This would be the Bullets' ultimate test to see if they can get out of the shadow of the Knicks at last. The Bullets' Gus Johnson got hurt in Game 7 against the Sixers and wouldn't return until Game 6 in the series. The story of the series was Wes Unseld and newcomer John Trestman doing a spectacular job on the glass, as well as limiting Willis Reed's dominance on the scorer's table. The big men of the Bullets wore down Reed and the Knicks throughout the series. Truthfully, the series didn't start out in Baltimore's favor. They dropped the first 2 games of the series, getting out-rebounded and out-hustled by the battle-tested Knicks. But Coach Shue made some adjustments, and the results were Baltimore locking down the paint and securing rebounds for the talented scoring tandem of Earl Monroe and Jack Marin, who each scored over 21 a game, with all of the starters once again averaging double figures throughout the series. The talented Minutemen's bench of the Knicks, consisting of Mike Reardon, Cazzie Russell, Dave Stallworth, were shut down to the tune of 16 combined points per game on 35% shooting for the entire series. Even with the struggles of Reed and the Knicks bench, this series still went the full 7 games, with Gus Johnson returning off the bench in Game 6 and Game 7, both wins for the Bullets. Baltimore won a gritty Game 7 in New York by 2 points, overcoming a bounce-back game from Reed by shutting down Frazier and DeBusschere, who scored 13 points on 39% shooting and 9 points on 23% shooting, respectively. The Bullets finally beat the Knicks, and the reward for doing so was a throwdown with the NBA's best team, the 66-win Bucks. Not only did the Bucks feature the 71 NBA season's MVP, Lou Alcindor Jr., they had acquired another MVP, the Big O, Oscar Robertson. This was the first time the NBA had ever seen an MVP join another MVP's team. Don't let anyone tell you that KD did it first. The Bucks' 3-headed monster of the 2 MVPs plus Bob Dandridge proved to be too lethal for the Bullets, as each averaged more than 20 a game, and the Bucks unfortunately swept the Bullets, none of the games being particularly close. The sting of losing the NBA Finals in this fashion meant changes were on the horizon. After both teams had championship aspirations the previous season but fell short, both felt it was time to reshuffle, especially considering how strong the Bucks were with Kareem. He changed his name right after the championship win over the Bullets. Oscar Robertson and Bob Dandridge, as well as the LA Lakers with West, Chamberlain, and Goodrich. The first big move the Knicks made was trading Cazzie Russell to the Warriors for Jerry Lucas, an undersized center who was known for his deep shots in an era without a three-point line. He was signed to be the backup to Willis Reed, but when Reed suffered a season-ending injury 3 games in, Lucas became the starting center for the Knicks the rest of the way. Lucas had built a name for himself as one of the best shooters and rebounders in the league while with the Cincinnati Royals, playing with Oscar Robertson. The second big move was trading for the Bullets' Earl Monroe, who was involved in a bitter contract dispute with Baltimore ownership. The Knicks gave up the rest of their famed bench reserves, Reardon and Dave Stallworth, in order to get Monroe. I don't think we'll see teams that have eliminated each other 6 straight times in the playoff trade all-star players to each other in the middle of said streak again, but these were certainly different times. Along with acquiring Reardon and Stallworth, the Bullets acquired all-star Archie Clark from the Sixers, who was left over from the trade that brought Wilt to LA. Rookie Phil Chenier was also a great pickup from the supplemental draft, With both teams reloading for the 72 season, they again met in the playoffs, with the Knicks winning in 6 games, the firepower of Frazier, Lucas, and Monroe being too much for Clark and Reardon. The Knicks beat the reassembled Celtics, led by John Havlicek, JoJo White, and Dave Cowens, to meet the Lakers once again in the 71 finals. As well as the Knicks played without Willis Reed, they weren't going to overcome Wilt Chamberlain without Reed. DeBusschere and Lucas struggled to control the paint over Wilt, and the Lakers, led by Gil Goodrich and Jerry West scoring, won the series in 5 games. Elvin Hayes was the one player picked before Wes Unseld in the '68 draft, and although Unseld won MVP and Rookie of the Year, it made complete sense. Hayes won the scoring title his rookie year with the San Diego Rockets, but had issues with Rockets ownership about his contract, and after 4 seasons with the team, the situation deteriorated completely, and Hayes was traded, having averaged 27 points and 16 rebounds in his 4 years with the team, cementing himself as one of the very best centers in the league. The Bullets jumped at the opportunity to add a player with that level of scoring and rebounding to their team, particularly to lighten the load on Unseld, as well as to replace longtime All-Star Gus Johnson, who left the team after the previous season. With Hayes and Unseld solidifying the Bullets front court, the huge leap forward in year 2 from Phil Chenier, as well as former Knicks reserves Mike Reardon's big year as a starter, the 73 Bullet squad figured to be in good shape with Archie Clark running point, even despite the awkwardness from the previous year after Clark was traded to the Bullets and refused to play for several games until he got a new contract. Clark got hurt early in the year and missed a lot of time, only playing in 39 games. The Bullets still won 52 games and once again faced the Knicks in the playoffs. Getting Jerry Lucas from the Warriors ended up paying huge dividends for the Knicks, as it was apparent that Willis Reed was unfortunately on his last legs. Even still, the Knicks had a great team, with Earl Monroe, Lucas, as well as new top reserves in Dave Mimiger and some guy named Phil Jackson. The Knicks were able to play an 8-man rotation, keeping their bigs refreshed. All of the big men on the Knicks could get their own buckets, and it didn't hurt having Clyde Frazier running the point either. The Knicks won 57 games in 73 and earned yet another date with destiny with Baltimore. I wish I could say this series was competitive and fired up with both teams displaying how well they gelled with their new players, but the truth is only one of these teams exhibited that, and I'll give you a hint. It was the team with more all-star level players. The Knicks with Earl Monroe, Clyde Frazier, Willis Reed, Jerry Lucas, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, and the Zen Master weren't going down to the Bullets, who questionably played their starters 40 minutes plus the entire series and rarely used their bench. The Bullets took their only W in Baltimore in Game 4, with the Knicks taking the rest in convincing fashion. The 68-win Celtics were waiting for the Knicks in the ECF. This series started off pretty chaotic, with both teams splitting the first 2 games in blowout fashion, before the Knicks won back-to-back games by 7 points, going up 3-1. The Celtics then won 2 games themselves, setting up a Game 7 in Boston. Boston's Havlicek was injured in Game 3, and although he played a gutsy series to get Boston back into it, he was out of gas and as stiff as a board for Game 7 and scored only 4 points as the C's struggled to pass to each other open and were off their game. The Knicks won Game 7 handily, giving the Celtics their first ever Game 7 loss in Boston. The Knicks returned to the NBA Finals for the 3rd time in 4 years, this time hoping to get revenge from the previous season when the Lakers finally won a ring without Willis Reed in the lineup for the Knicks. This time, however, it was the Lakers who were battling injuries. Happy Hairston shredded his knee pretty badly early in the season and tried to return to help the Lakers in the series, but was completely ineffective. And one of their top reserves, a guy named Pat Riley, yes, Pat Riley and Phil Jackson were in these finals as reserves, was nursing an injury of his own and barely played. Wilt was also in his last season, but still led the league in rebounding and set a new record in shooting percentage, a record that stood for a long time. LA managed to take the first game, but the Knicks took advantage of the Lakers' depleted roster by throwing fresh bodies at Chamberlain throughout the game, with Reed doing a great job defending, and DeBusschere and Bill Bradley and Phil Jackson coming in and out of the games to assist on the glass and with Chamberlain. Holzman had his quick-footed and disciplined guards swarm West and Gil Goodrich, forcing him to pass out or take contested shots. Despite the Lakers having 3 guys averaging over 20 in the series, Goodrich, McMillan, and West, the Lakers just couldn't keep up with the deep bench of the Knicks, as well as the genius mind of Holzman. The Knicks won 4 games in a row after dropping Game 1, and Willis Reed was named Finals MVP for the second time for his job on Wilt Chamberlain. A big shift behind the scenes of the Baltimore Bullets reared its head before the '74 season. With so-so attendance despite the relative success of the Bullets, ownership was facing financial troubles and orchestrated a move to the nation's capital, with the idea being that the DC metropolis had a far larger population than Baltimore at the time and was ripe for a basketball team. Coach Gene Shue was not keen on the idea of moving, as he felt Baltimore was home and didn't like what this meant for their fans that did support the team. He resigned and became coach of the Sixers, who had a then NBA worst record of 9-73 the year before. Shue gained a reputation for his coaching career of turning bad teams around, as he eventually would get the Sixers into the finals, as well as return to the Bullets to get them back to the playoffs during the 1980s. The Bullets tagged former Boston Celtic great Casey Jones as coach, his first head coaching gig in the NBA after coaching the San Diego Conquistadors of the ABA the year before. Despite injuries to Wes Unseld and Archie Clark that caused them to miss substantial time, the Bullets returned to the playoffs to face off against, you probably guessed it, the New York Knicks. The '74 Knicks were beat up and getting older. The 2 legendary centers, Jerry Lucas and Willis Reed, were shells of themselves. Reed played in only 19 games and barely scratched 13 minutes in the series, but Jerry Lucas had 11 minutes. Even still, the Knicks had firepower with Frazier and Monroe, as well as the great role players DeBusschere and Bradley to help shore up the scoring. The Bullets got next to nothing out of anyone not named Hayes or Chenier, with injuries greatly slowing down Unseld, '74 being the worst season of his career across the board in scoring, rebounding, and passing. Once again, the Bullets fell to the Knicks, albeit in a full 7 games. The Knicks, beat up from playing the physical Bullets for 7 games, fell to the eventual champions Boston Celtics in 5 in the ECF, who slumbered for just 5 years after the Russell-led dynasty before returning to being a consistent championship contender for the next 15 years. The rivalry of the Bullets-Knicks essentially ends here, but it wouldn't be the end of the Wes Unseld-led Bullet story. The now Washington Bullets dominated the NBA in the '75 season, winning 60 games, matching the defending champion Celtics for the best record in the NBA. They beat the Buffalo Braves and MVP Bob McAdoo in 7 before beating the champion Celtics in 6 to return to the NBA Finals once again. Unfortunately, the Bullets were swept by the Warriors, led by Rick Barry, a superstar surrounded by great role players, Dirk before Dirk, and one of their greatest individual playoff performances ever. The Bullets, once again, were one of the best teams in '76, winning 48 games to face off against the Cavaliers in their first playoff appearance since joining the NBA in the '71 season. Coached by Bill Fitch, the Cavaliers were a disciplined defensive team without a clear-cut star. They had 7 scorers average double digits, but only Jim Schones led the team with 15 points. This notion of them not having stars, as well as being seen as an expansion-level team, led to Casey Jones being fired when they lost the series to the Cavs in 7 games, despite the Cavs winning 2 games off the eventual champion Celtics and the ECF. It would be another 8 years before Casey Jones got another head coaching gig, taking the job for his former team, the Celtics, ironically succeeding Bill Fitch, the Cavaliers coach they lost to in '76. Casey Jones would become a great coach for the Celtics, winning 2 more championships. Enter Dick Moda, who coached the expansion Bulls into a tough squad before taking the job for the '77 season. The roster itself was mostly unchanged. The Bullets won 48 games, beating the Cavs this time in the first round of the expanded playoffs, before dropping to the Rockets in the semifinals. This video has gotten very long, I know, but all great stories require a journey of sacrifice, adversity, and determination to get to the final act. The Bullets' story of chasing a championship is akin to the story of Odysseus, a perilous journey of tragedy and triumph, but never quite reaching the final destination. Most would fold in this position, but Wes Unseld and the Bullets fans were not most. The '78 Bullets made one particularly noticeable move, acquiring Bob Dandridge from the Bucks. Dandridge had been the third wheel during the days of the MVPs Kareem and Oscar, but here he got to shine brightly as the star he always was. The Bullets did take some time to gel, winning just 48 games and having to play in the first round. Non-division winners played a 2-game series in the first round in this format, against the John Drew-led Hawks, winning both games to set up a matchup against the George Gervin-led Spurs. Despite the efforts of Gervin, who scored 33 points on 55% shooting along with 2 blocks, the Bullets won in 6 games to advance to the ECF against the Sixers, who fired Shu earlier in the season after they appeared in the finals the year before. Even with the Sixers' lethal scoring lineup of Dr. J, George McGinnis, Doug Collins, and World B. Free, they were no match for the complete team of the Bullets, whose bench had stepped up big in the series, with the thermal nuclear Elvin Hayes leading the charge with 23 points, 16 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 blocks a game in the series. The Bullets won in 6 to return to the NBA Finals for the 3rd time since drafting Wes Unseld out of Louisville in '68. The Bullets matched up against the plucky, underdog Seattle Supersonics, who beat the favored Lakers, Blazers, and Nuggets to reach the NBA Finals for their first time. Dennis Johnson, Gus Williams, Marvin Webster made up the underrated core that pushed Seattle to the top in the late 1970s. The expansion era of the NBA was an exciting time, and more small market teams were experiencing success, and the status quo of the Lakers-Celtics ruling the roost was starting to change. The Bullets Sonics were certainly a sign basketball was beginning to change, and the '78 finals were pegged to be an exciting and hard-to-call series. The series went the distance, with the Bullets finally getting the monkey off their back and winning Game 7 in Seattle. Wes Unseld was named Finals MVP despite being outscored by 8 teammates, including 3 bench players. Yes, the status quo was certainly changing. Unseld was proof that a player can be extremely valuable without scoring very many points. The leadership, dedication to defense and rebounding, as well as a never-say-die attitude that got Wes Unseld to be an unlikely MVP twice. The Bullets Sonics would return to the finals again in '79, this time with the Sonics winning 4-1. Neither team has since won a championship, and neither has the New York Knicks, unfortunately. Whether it was in Baltimore or Washington, D.C., Wes Unseld proved you didn't need to have the best handles, score the most points, or block 100 shots to be an MVP. Willis Reed proved sacrifice and sheer determination can influence great things to happen. Along with Clyde Frazier, Coach Red Holzman, and the rest of the early '70s Knicks, Reed brought the city of New York 2 championships that their fans will cherish and remember forever. We can only hope that the Knicks and the now Washington Wizards can one day bring another championship to their fans. Oh boy, this was a long one. Thank you once again for making this far. You're a trooper. I hope you learned, and perhaps more importantly, enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. We now have a Patreon page. Fans will be able to vote on topics as well as enter future drawings. We have gained a lot of traction lately thanks to your support. I am Hookshot Drew. Stay tuned for more in our series on the greatest NBA rivalries.